Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Loren Feldman. This episode is dedicated to Ivy Garfield. Back in 1996, Jay Goltz had no real hiring process and the results to prove it. My hiring success rate, Jay tells us, was probably, 30 or 40%, which isn't much better than whoever walks in, you hire. And then he asked Ivy Garfield to take over his hiring. As Jay explains, Ivy brought an instinct, an understanding of how to assess people. She profoundly changed my business, he tells us. She was here 6 years. Most of my key people she hired. They're with me 25 years later. Jay talks about the secret to Ivy's success and why entrepreneurs like him tend to be terrible at hiring. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will, if nothing else, let owners know they are not alone in facing these challenges. Same thing with the 21 Hats Morning Report, which you can subscribe to at 21hats.substack.com. One housekeeping note, we're publishing this episode the week of Thanksgiving. Because of the holiday, we will not be taping this week, which means we will not have a podcast next week. Maybe you'll listen to this one twice. And just a reminder, you can always find a transcript of our conversations at 21hats.com. This week's 21 Hats podcast lineup features Jay Goltz, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist's frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home, and Dana White, who is CEO of Paralee Boyd, a chain of hair salons based in Detroit. The episode is titled, She Was a Hiring Goddess. Welcome, Jay and Dana. As you know, the whole premise of 21 Hats and this podcast is that you have to wear a lot of hats to build a business, and no one can possibly be prepared to do all the things you have to do to build a business. So how do people handle that? One way I've heard from lots of owners is to try to find a mentor, somebody who can offer some guidance. And I'm curious what your experiences have been in this area. How do you find one? How do you know you have the right one? Jay, have you ever had a mentor?
No. And not only have I never had a mentor, I've never had a job. So I was just plopped in. I started my business by myself. My father owned a dime store. I certainly had a good idea of taking care of customers, but I never knew what happened in the accounting. He didn't advertise. He had one employee, Edna. So I really was just thrown into the world by myself, not knowing anything. But the problem was I didn't know that I didn't know anything. So as I always say, I don't want to brag. I think I've made every mistake you can make. And it was extremely painful, extremely stressful, not efficient. I don't think the word mentor was even used much back then. Never would have crossed my mind.
It didn't occur to you to try to find one.
Didn't even occur to me. And I just went for years, just try, fail. And I did figure it out along the way, but it was just I'm talking about 15, 20 years.
Looking back, do you think it would have made a difference if you'd had a mentor?
I think you had a mentor,
my God.
Jay.
Really? Who would that?
You had a mentor. Your uncle.
Oh, no. I was very tight with my uncle, but he worked in my father's store with him. He was of no. I grew up, he played catch with me, but he was not at all. No, I really did not. I did have a few good conversations with people over the years that I can tell you off the top of my head, things that were profoundly changed my head. One was I was in a business group. This guy was about 50. He's 50 something. I was 30. And he said something to me that was maybe the smartest thing anyone ever said to me. He said, Jay, everyone gets to a point where they realize they have limitations. And it's usually when you hit 50. Now, when he told me that at 30, I said, oh my God, that's pathetic, not me. And then I turned 50 and I thought, oh my God, was he on the money? And then I had a guy tell me one time, he said, listen, in business, you got 3 potential problems: partners, the bank, and a landlord. That was very profound too. And you know what? I got rid of my landlords, almost all. I'm trying to get rid of my bank, and I don't have any partners. And I think that was also profound. And then the last one, I joined a business group. They're mostly older guys. I'm probably 30. This guy looks across the table at me, and all he says is, so have you toughened up yet? Wow. That's like the extent of my mentorship. The rest of it,
Do you think would have made a difference if you'd had one person through the years to talk to?
Absolutely. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I literally went through 10 production managers over a period of I don't know, 2 or 3 years.
This is the key person running your factory making frames.
Yeah, running for the a framing factory. I had probably 30 people at the time, 20, 30, and I was trying to get out of the back, and I was trying to get someone to run the thing. And every time I'd hire someone, and I think this is going to work out, and then it didn't. And I did have one guy, Monroe Roth. He's 92 years old now. I hired a consultant, and he looked at what I was doing, and he said, Jay, I figured out your problem. You keep hiring production managers, and you think you're hiring CEOs. Boom, right on the money.
What did he mean by that? Easy.
I knew exactly what he meant. I thought you hire a guy who's older than you that's run a factory, you tell him what to do, and then you go back to whatever you were doing. He's going to take care of it. That was half the problem. And frankly, he didn't get the other half. He was totally on the money with that you need to train people and stick with them for months and train them. You can't just hire someone and leave them alone. But when you're 30 and you hire a 50-year-old, you think they know, and they used to run a factory, you assume they know everything, and you don't need to do that. That was the first problem. The second problem was, for the amount of money I was paying, I was not going to get a really successful, smart person to run a factory. The guys that I were hiring were basically didn't work at, were people that failed at their last job. Let's just take a number. Let's say you decide to hire someone for $50,000 a year. For a 50-year-old guy to pay him $50,000, or a woman to pay them $50,000 a year to run a factory, that's not a lot of money. So who am I going to get for that? I'm going to get people who, were desperate for jobs. Versus I hired a 27-year-old who, that's a good job for a 27-year-old who's making 40, right? And here we are 25 years later, and he's still with me, and he's making a good income now. And if I would have had a mentor, oh my God, one 60-second conversation would have given me the clue. The other, probably the biggest mistake I've made in business, for sure, cash-wise, I wasn't charging enough. I was growing like crazy. Didn't have a great bottom line. And I should have charged 3, 4, 5% more, because I was giving a tremendous value and a tremendous service. Dana, because I've talked to you about this. That's one of the common mistakes of entrepreneurs. They're always afraid to charge what they should charge. And people in the framing industry use the phrase, oh, well, I want to be fair, or, I don't want to, rip anyone off. Those words are not the right word. The right word is, are you charging the appropriate price? And the appropriate price is, if you're giving a tremendous service and a tremendous product, you need to charge a certain amount of money in order to have a bottom line. You cannot simultaneously give the greatest service and be the cheapest place. Those two things don't work together.
And if you had charged more, it would have presumably brought in a little bit more money, but it also would have slowed the growth. Would that have been a good thing or a bad thing?
Absolutely. It would have been magical. It would have both slowed I was growing at 20, 30% a year. It was nonstop chaos. And so yes, it would have slowed the growth down, but I would have not gotten into the bank thing of borrowing from the bank. And I went to the bank. I remember this like yesterday. This is the first time I ever borrowed from a bank. And I went to the banker with my financials, and I said, listen, I'm a little embarrassed. I didn't make as much money as I thought I was going to. Opens it up, goes to the last page. Well, you made money. And that was the end of the conversation. Now, if he wasn't a banker and he was a business consultant, he would have said, Jay.
Or a mentor.
Right. He would have said, what, you got a 2% bottom line, you're borrowing money. Why don't you raise your prices 5%? You won't have to borrow money from the bank. So yeah, those kinds of things.
Dana, how about you? What's your experience been? Have you had a mentor?
I have. And so it's funny how, Jay is saying, I wish, I could go back in time and tell myself these two things. And those are the very two things that he's told me that have changed my business. I consider Jay a mentor. It's not official. We didn't go to the mountaintop and declare it under the stars, right?
I do have some paperwork I'm sending you to sign, though.
It started when we all met in Chicago for dinner, and I was really, really stressed out. And I just kind of casually mentioned an overview of what I was stressed out about. And Jay said, oh, no, you're fine. That's how business is. And I looked, because it wasn't so much what he said, it was how he said it. And with his experience, the ease at which, he was like, oh, yeah, that's fine. And so I'm thinking these are red flags that I'm closing my doors. And that was the beginning of me saying, he might have some insight. So over time, even our listeners on the podcast can hear hey, Dana, you're paying somebody, so many dollars per hour and expecting them to do, $60,000, $60,000 a year job. If you want your business to grow, you have to pay the person. Well, that's what Jay wished he could have had someone tell him. Well, that's what he told me. And it changed my business drastically. Dana, raise your prices, raise your prices, raise your prices. So we did. And that bump in price has helped. So I've had a mentor, and Jay has become my mentor. And I think,
am I the main mentor? I want to be the main mentor.
You're
number
the main
one
mentor.
All right.
You're number one.
All right.
Prior to Jay, I was on the lookout for a mentor because I understand that it would be integral for my growth. I knew that for my business, I wasn't going to find a direct mentor, but I did know I needed someone who had enough business experience.
Why is that, Dana? I mean, because you feel like you're breaking new ground and it's a business that other people wouldn't understand?
Exactly. It's not that other people wouldn't understand it. It's just because I'm doing something different. And I've had to bend some of the business rules to fit my business. And so I knew I wasn't going to find a woman who had operated a walk-in only lean manufactured hair salon for 10 years, 20, 30 years, right? I know I was the one. I know I'm doing it. But it doesn't mean that I couldn't find somebody who had years of experience in manufacturing, had years of experience in business in general. So that's what I found. Unfortunately, that mentor-mentee relationship became more about control and power than it did about...
This is not Jay you're talking about here.
It's not Jay at all. No.
I have no power.
Or control.
I have no control.
Certainly no control.
That's hilarious. No, this was when I was looking, some years ago, I felt, okay, it's time for me to get a mentor. I'm having a lot of questions that I need answered from somebody with experience. And so I, found a mentor, asked them if they would be my mentor, and they agreed. And over time, like I said, that relationship, although I did get very valuable things out of it, there were some things that I got that weren't so good. There were some lessons that I got that weren't so good. And
can you give us a hint? What are you talking about?
The lesson that I learned is for myself as a business owner, there are some questions that you grow up, Dana, meaning there are some questions you need to ask up front to make sure that the intentions of your mentor are above board. And even though you may not get an honest answer, I was a little naive, I think, thinking, oh, yeah, just mentor mentee. And that was not the case. There were other things that they wanted that I was unwilling to give. And that is how that relationship turned in from mentor mentee with a hint of control and power, a need of control and power that were being exercised. So
we're talking about ulterior motives, basically.
Ulterior motives. That's it. They had ulterior motives, although they gave me valuable insight, really worked with me about this ever looming fear I would have about my business, always worried that I was 2 steps away from failing or one decision away from failing. They helped with that. But what I didn't know was there's this undercurrent of ulterior motive. And as I grew as a business owner, that, came more and more and more to the surface.
Did you meet this person and develop the mentor-mentee relationship kind of just by chance, or had you been looking for a mentor?
I had been looking for a mentor. I was at an event and I saw this person and I said, you know what? I had heard this person speak and I said, this may be the person, I think this would be the person that, may be a good mentor. So I approached them and they agreed. And for several years, we would meet and talk about business. And I think one of the things I learned from a mentor-mentee relationship is that it's not one-sided, that they too were getting, valuable lessons from me having been younger, and my perspective on business was different because I was younger. But like I said, there were ulterior motives that would occasionally percolate. and I was naive thinking, oh, no, that's not what they meant. Oh, no. Right. But over time, and as I grew as a business owner, I realized that, yes, there's valuable things that they're getting, but it can't continue healthily if these ulterior motives don't go away or not. And I found that they were rooted in control and power. And, there was a power that was being wielded, a liking of seeing me squirm, or, having this younger person listening to you, taking what you're saying as, gold, and, using that to their benefit. So it's not a great feeling, but then you meet somebody like Jay who just wants to share what he knows. And then I've shared it with other people, and I've had people, can I talk to him? I need to talk to him. You mind if I call Jay? So
I'm unlisting my phone number.
I hope you sent them the link to the podcast when they ask.
Some of them are already listeners.
Excellent.
And that's another reason how they know who Jay is.
I have three things I want to share. I went to a business seminar, and I think it was the owners of the White Sox, Jerry Reinsdorf and Eddie Einhorn, and they were talking, and you got to get perspective. I've never worked anywhere. I've never had a boss, so I've never really gotten feedback. And they're talking about some of the screw-ups they did in buying the White Sox, and it's like I literally sat there and thought, oh my God, these two smart guys made mistakes. I thought I was the only one making mistakes. And I really didn't understand it, which was really a breakthrough. And which is why, Dana, when I said to you, oh, listen, that stuff happened, just getting off the hook with thinking you're not an idiot is a valuable thing. Like, I used to torture myself all day long thinking about how stupid I was. And I realized that when you're growing a business, this stuff happens regularly. That's the first thing. Number two is Dana has been, and I certainly didn't do it for this reason, but this has been an extremely trying year with all the social unrest, and I had my window broken and the whole thing. Dana has been a gift from God to help me understand this better. I thought I did, but I really didn't. And this is going both. I've told her this, and I've told her this. As much as I've helped her, she's helped me. So I'm not saying it always works out there with every situation, but in this case, she has given me insights that I would have never been able to get anywhere else. So she owes me nothing, and we are even. So that's number two. And number three is I like helping. I like picture framers. I like people that I love picture framing. That's my main business. And I like helping people with stuff that nobody helped me with because it was extremely frustrating. And I like being on the podcast because I want to help ease the pain of all these people that are out there trying to figure this out, because being an entrepreneur is a very lonely thing.
I've been dying to ask you about something that Laura Zander said on the show last week about hiring. She talked about how she has had success through the years not hiring people to fill needs, but hiring people who she thought were good people that she could bring in and then figure out what they would do. The latest example is a salesperson she hired who's a longtime friend. He'd been a sales rep who had sold her company things through the years. He had moved on to do other things, and she decided she wanted to bring him in. She hadn't been looking for a salesperson, but he was available, so they set it up, and he's now responsible for 50% of the revenue at Madeline Tosh, the yarn supply business that she bought some time ago. So my question to you is, does that make sense to you?
I think that certainly can work and does work, but I don't know that that's in place of figuring out what you need, putting an ad out, writing the right ad. But that certainly can work. I certainly wouldn't call that, in my mind, a strategy for hiring. I think, but if you happen to find someone you like that you think is competent, that is into what you're doing, yes, certainly, I think that would be a great thing to do. But I still don't think, I still think the conventional write a great ad, put it out there, interview 5-10 people and find someone that's right, that works too.
Which is what you did, Dana, when you hired your operations manager recently, correct?
Yes. So we hired the operations manager. We put out an ad, and several people applied, and she applied. So
you knew what you needed. You had a job that had to be filled, and fortunately seemed to have found the right person.
Yes. When she applied it was great. She applied. We interviewed her. She walked out and we were like, whoa, that was great. And again, when I was looking to hire her, I called up Jay or text Jay, said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And he said, these are the things you need to look out for. And hear what her references have to say, and which all added up. When she came on, we shut down the salon for 2 weeks so we could do a hiring drive. And it's been working out great.
Jay, you were talking before about how much you struggled hiring that production person. Was there a turning point for you at the company where you figured out?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, here it is. I'm interviewing. My turnover is horrible at this point. My hiring success rate is probably, 40%, which isn't much better than whoever walks in you hire. I mean, if you probably just hire whoever walks in, you'll probably have a 25% success rate. So mine was marginally better than that. So I'm interviewing this woman who's probably, I know how what year it was. I was 40. She was 35, let's say. And I'm having a hard time with the hiring thing. And I asked her, she's running a lighting showroom, selling lighting fixtures. So I said, how many salespeople do you have? She goes, 4. I said, how many did you have to hire to get to the good 4? And she goes, 4. And I literally laugh out loud. I laugh and I go, wow, either your standards are lower than mine or you're some kind of hiring goddess. Her name was Ivy Garfield. So she starts hiring for me.
You hired her?
I hired her.
What convinced you that she was?
I figured I'd give it a shot. I needed a manager. Well, now this was 1996. Most of the people she hired from me still work for me. She was a hiring goddess, and I would sit through interviews with her, and then they'd leave, and she goes, what do you think? I go, yeah, I think Loren Feldman is should work out okay. Are you kidding? And then she would give in 10 reasons why it wasn't going to work out, and she was right. So she profoundly changed my business. She made me.
What did she know?
Well, I'll tell you what she told me. And then there's the rest of the story, which I'll share. She said, I'm going to tell you why I'm successful at hiring. My parents got divorced when I was a year old. My mother has no maternal instincts whatsoever. I basically had to raise myself, and I've learned not to trust anybody.
Wow. And that was the secret to hiring?
Absolutely. I come up with, and people, this is one of those things, people are going to take offense when I say this, but I'm sorry, I just have to tell you, because this is going against something your mother told you and you've heard your entire life. When it comes to hiring, guilty until proven innocent. Don't just because someone goes, oh, I'm a hard worker and you can, doesn't mean that's true. You need to check it out. You need to call their references. You need to ask the right questions to really flush out. Oh, you're good with customer service. Tell me about a difficult situation with a customer. How do you handle it? And I've always said this. Entrepreneurs make the worst people hiring a lot of the time. Why? They like people. They want to talk about their company because they're proud of it. And they got 20 other hats to deal with. They want to get done with this and they want to get that person hired. As a result, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, I was just doing it like that. And people would tell, and then over the years when someone left, either I had a fire or they quit, I would do an autopsy. 80-90% of the time, I would think back to, yeah, there was a red flag on the interview. I just didn't want to pay attention to it. Or I didn't check the reference enough. Or she gave me her coworker as a reference, not her boss. That hiring is an art and a science, and I didn't get it. And she profoundly changed my business. And she was here 6 years. Most of my key people she hired. They're with me 25 years later.
Wow. She was only there 6 years? And
yes.
That's amazing.
Yes, they're still with me. I have people with me 25 years, 24 years, 23 years. I got a salesperson selling framing. He's been with me 21 years. They're still here. And she moved to Oregon. She called me twice a year. I would talk to her. And today's Thursday. Tuesday night I got a call. She died. She hit.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I have to tell you, I got up at 2:30 in the morning. I went in the kitchen. I started typing, and I just cried. She believed in me. She believed in my company. She believes in these people. It really has shook me up. And part of the reason I'm telling you this is, anyone who thinks that business is just business does it. When you work with people and you're on the mission together, this is really the first person I can think of in 42 years that I worked with and that died. And it kind of shook me to my core because I came to work and I talked to the people who she had hired and everybody was crying. And I said, good. I said, Ivy deserved people to be crying for her. And I owe her a lot. She totally put my company on a different trajectory, which is part of the reason why I'm thrilled to be able to talk to Dana and anyone else and help them because she helped me.
I'm sorry that you got that news.
I am so sorry to hear. I was shocked. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Dana, does that guilty until proven innocent thing make sense to you?
Yes. I like guilty until proven innocent. I like everybody is on stage. Like, that's how I look at it. When I'm sitting down with a candidate, the Oscar goes to. I listen to their performance and I glean from their performance what I can, understanding that they will break character at some point, and then that's the meat of it. That's when you get to see who they are, who and really what they are, and what they're going to do. The way you can break through that performance, make cracks in it, is by speaking to their references. Because their references worked with them, when the curtain was down, behind the scenes. So that's what I do.
I'm not cynical. I'm not saying everybody's a liar. If you want to hire great people, I don't mean okay people. If you want to hire great people, and whenever I've done this speech in front of a bunch of experienced business owners, everybody's head is nodding yes. Out of 10 people, one's a great hire. Three of them would be okay, but just not at your business. They don't, they don't like retail. They live too far. There's lots. They might be a great employee doing something else. So that gets us up to 4. And then there's another 3 or 4 who are just solidly mediocre. They're okay. They're not there. And then the last couple can't keep a job. I mean, so this isn't about being cynical. This is about math. That's what this is. This is about simple math. And since I've adopted this, since I've gotten better at it, our hiring rate here is, I'd say 85% of the people we hire work out great. And I'm happy to say that one of the managers she's hired, I just coincidentally talked to her Saturday. I went up to her and I said, I just want to tell you something, because they know how I feel about Ivy and stuff. I go, I just want to tell you something. I've always used her as the gold standard. I said, you've gotten just as good at hiring as she is. And it's true. My people have gotten better at it, and as a group we're better at it. So, and I would challenge someone to tell me what is more important as a business owner than hiring the right people. I'd be curious. I would challenge someone to tell me what would be more interesting, more important. And when I do speeches, I ask people in the audience, it'll be 50, 100 people. I go, I want raise your hand if you've ever had some training on how to properly hire someone. And almost no hands ever go up. It's not even on the radar.
Since hiring our operations manager, we now have a wait list for people. And for hire, we're talking about, I had 3 people October 19th, and we're fully staffed with a wait list.
And for those of you that have been listening to this podcast since the beginning, I hope you're as thrilled as I am that Dana is 10 years older than she was
a year ago, right?
A year
This year
ago.
Has aged all of us, Jay.
No, I mean it, but 20 years older. And I met you at New York at the Forbes thing that Loren was there, and I still smile when I think of this. You sat up there and you said, I don't do messy, and I laughed.
Right.
And I told you later, business is messy. I know what you're saying, but I think you've figured out since that. Yeah, it's messy, and our job is to clean it up. But
the messy part can be, there are business owners who get too in the weeds. That's messy. Yeah. There are business owners who don't delegate properly. That's messy. There's business owners who need to be in control. And who have baggage from other jobs or insecurities from their life, and they bring it into the workplace, and it's messy
and dysfunctional.
And extremely dysfunctional. I had a conversation with an entrepreneur yesterday, and her leadership team, although qualified, are not empowered to do anything without picking up the phone and calling her, and it's driving her nuts. And so I had to have a real candid conversation about how she's contributing to that problem. And, she's like, well, she yells at them. She said, I run my house the way I run my business and vice versa. I said, these people that work with you are not your children.
Great. So then your employees and your kids will hate you then. Great. That's consistent.
You're constantly hiring. I love what my operations manager said about constantly hiring, but she's setting up an environment where we're not having to do so all the time. What she's thinking by constantly hiring is that when a staff member leaves, we don't have to adjust the business in order to keep the business running. In Ashley's mind, the business comes first. Here's the business standard. This is what it takes to open and operate it. So finally, paying somebody who has the experience and the knowledge to make sure that the business stays consistent so we can grow is invaluable. So Jay, you're right. I would have never hired an operations manager had you not said to me, and Laura said, you can't afford not to.
Right. And I only know that because I tried treating $18 an hour employees as managers of 20 people. And it's a different level. And I only know because, like I said, I've done it 20 times wrong.
Yep.
Can I just throw one thing? And you mentioned, I read yelling is destructive behavior. End of the story. Yeah. And for those entrepreneurs that say, oh, well, I'm just passionate. No, you're an asshole. You're an asshole.
No, you're a jerk.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. Stop it.
And I have said this to entrepreneurs. You never, ever show anger.
It screws people's heads up.
You have
no idea what you're doing to them, but you have no idea what you're doing to their head. You could remind them of their screaming mother, their father. It's not right. You're humiliating them. You're humiliating yourself. It's just destructive behavior.
I never show anger. I might show, and I think I showed it yesterday on the phone with my operations management, disappointment. And that's that's being quiet.
Yeah.
And letting it sit the question that I've asked her and letting it sit. And I'll stay there for a minute to get an answer. And it's not an answer to be condescending. It's not an answer to prove a point. It's an answer to get understanding. Hey. So that yelling thing that people do, and some people do it because they believe for some sitcom they saw in the 70s that's how you are a boss.
Yeah, no, it's one of the last things that's left, that it's okay to make fun of the screaming boss, and it's not funny. And here's the key. If someone is really it is more professional and more humane and more productive to quietly, if you've already told them something 6 times and they're not getting it, you call them in the office and say, Dana, I'm sorry, but we've talked about this 6 times. This is the wrong job for you. Today's your last day. That's professional management. Humiliating in front of 6 people is not going to help them, is not going to help your business, and is going to hurt everybody. So, and believe me, 30 years ago, I was screaming because I was at the end of my rope, and I'm not making an excuse for it. I was wrong, but it's bad.
All right. We're going to do something a little bit different this week, which is Jay and I are going to make an apology. I think I speak for both of us in saying we don't like to make mistakes, but we're eager to correct them, and we appreciate it when somebody calls them to our attention. Earlier this year, over the course of several podcasts, Jay, I asked you about things you were doing to try to stay on the offensive during a tough economic time. And we talked about how you had a series of conversations with the owner of a picture framing shop who had announced he was closing that shop. And in the process, we made a couple of mistakes. I think number one, we assumed that since we didn't mention his name, his store, his location, that no one would know who we were talking about. But it turns out that some people in the industry did connect the dots. And in retrospect, we should have known better. And the second thing is, I think.
Let me take over from here. Because that was your side. That was. You can take that half of it, and I share that with you. The other half is I figured out in the middle that I really didn't want to stick my neck out, and I wasn't sure it was going to work out for me. So I offered to sign a lease, but I wanted an escape clause, and he didn't want to do that. Okay, fair enough. And then I offered to buy the mailing list because I was under the impression wrongly, and this was my mistake. I just assumed he was closing. I said something about, I don't remember exactly what I said about, well, he made a mistake. I was wrong. I shouldn't have made that assumption because I had no idea.
The mistake was you assumed you knew more about why he was doing what he was doing.
I just figured he just wanted to close the shop and move on, which I completely understand and respect. He has a lovely business and he's a lovely guy. And I will tell you, I was sick to my stomach when I realized that I said or did anything that upset him or gave the wrong impression. I am profoundly sorry. That certainly wasn't my intent. I shouldn't have made that assumption. And it sounds like he made a good thing for himself and someone else is taking it over. Good for both of them.
It's worked out well for him. He sold the business. And
yes, and I'm happy for him and I'm happy for the person that did it.
I have to say, when I picked all of the regulars on this podcast, I picked them precisely because I'd known them for years, especially you, Jay, and because I knew that they would all speak authentically.
And unfiltered, perhaps?
Well, as much as possible.
Well, that's a problem because sometimes I am unfiltered.
There is a line somewhere, and I think we may have crossed it in this situation.
Well, we did. No, we did. I did. Not, I won't put this on you. This is on me. I shouldn't have said that. And I feel particularly bad because he's a really nice, good guy, and I like him. And I'm just grossed out that I caused him or anyone else any grief.
Well, I'm glad you said that, but I don't want you to get too civilized. We want to hear your unfiltered thoughts as much as possible, as close to that line as possible. I'm curious, Jay, this wasn't the first time that you've talked to somebody about the possibility of buying a framing shop. Is that you've been through that before, right?
No, I took inventory in my head. I'd say in the last, 5-6 years, occasions have come up that either I knew someone was getting older or I knew they were maybe selling it. I have reached out to, this would make the 8th frame shop. And 4 of them ended up not selling. They're still running it. Okay, that's fine. And 3 of them I called and said, listen, if you're ever interested, call me. They didn't. They just sold to someone else. Maybe they don't like me. Maybe, I don't know, which is certainly possible. And then this situation. So I'm 0 for 8. And at this stage, I think I'm done because this is the revelation. I'm trying to be disciplined, which is not that's always been difficult for me. I'm a recovering entrepreneurial-aholic. I need to stop starting businesses. I need to stop buying businesses. My business is big enough. I never thought there was such a thing as that, but there is. And I need to stop doing that.
Dana, you've thought about, as you grow your chain of hair salons, the possibility, especially given what's happened this year, of not just building from scratch, but taking over an existing salon. Is that something that you still think is a possibility for you?
Yes, but not in the form of buying it. For Paralee Boyd, it would be a matter of, with the opportunity to expand nationally. Unfortunately, several salons have closed. And for safety reasons, many stylists have gone into salon suites.
What's a salon suite?
So a salon suite is a big space, and each of that whole space is broken into individual salon suites, meaning there's a sink and a chair, or 2 sinks and 2 chairs, and that stylist is in that suite by themselves. So with an potential opportunity to expand to maybe 2 to 5 locations nationally, wow, what a time to come in and say, hey, I've got, the landlords are saying I can give you a discount, or you can, rent from me at a discount. So that's what I've been looking at, is the cost of build out would reduce because I'm not spending as much, because some of these salons are beautiful and they're already done.
It's good for the landlord. No, it's good for the landlord, for everybody.
If you bought one of these stores, to what extent does that make your job more difficult? Because nobody does it quite the way you do it. Do you get an advantage if you have to retrofit the store? Do you get an advantage if you're taking on people who have been working there previously and haven't been trained in your techniques?
No. I've had people email me several salons that are for sale, and most stylists in the salon don't know that the salon is going to be for sale. And so they're all full service salons. They're not like my salon. So Yeah, buying a salon would be a challenge for me.
A lot of small businesses just close. I mean, in the framing industry, there were 25,000 frame shops in America 10 years ago. Now there's 8. So
wait, 8,000, right?
8,000. Yeah, okay. There were 25,000. Now there's 8,000. But the bigger ones are the ones that are left. So that doesn't mean the industry shrunk by whatever percent, 80%.
Are people getting just as many things framed, or is there less business?
No. It's a lot of things. It's a combination of the baby boomers are in large part done framing, and that drove a lot of framing. It's a lot of frames now. People are putting pictures on their wall without frames, which is heresy, but actually people do that.
That's unbelievable.
I know. It's the beginning of the end of civilization, probably, but all right, whatever. Canvases that are stretched don't take frames, and then there's framed artwork you can buy in the stores now that 20 years ago, there wasn't that many stores you could walk into and find a bunch of framed artwork. And then there's some big chains. There's lots of reasons. And then here's one that people don't think about. Do you have a TV hanging on your wall?
I don't, but I know what you're talking about.
Right.
We do.
If the average apartment or house has 1 or 2 TVs hanging on the wall, wherever that TV is, probably would have been a picture. That could be 10% of your walls in a house. I mean, so right there's 10% right there. And then the stores that are selling framed pictures, that might be another 10%. And then the baby boomers are done.
Jay, you need a strategy to get TVs off the wall.
Yeah, no, my strategy is the industry's probably shrunk by 30%. I think it's stable. My strategy is just do a really good job for the people that do want to do framing, and it's okay. And I will tell you, and I'm dead serious when I say this, I would challenge anyone. You put a frame on a picture, it looks better than without a frame. So just saying.
On that note, guys, we are out of time. My thanks to Jay Goltz and Dana White.
Wait, I have one more thing to say. Lauren, can we dedicate this show to Ivy Garfield?
Ivy Garfield, yes.
We can do that. Because of the holiday, we won't be taping next week, which means we will not have an episode the following week. But I hope you, Dana and Jay, and our listeners have a wonderful, but most importantly, a safe Thanksgiving. We do want to see all of you back here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening, everybody. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Remember, we started the 21 Hats podcast to help business owners feel a little less isolated, to let them know they aren't the only ones fighting these battles. If you got something out of this conversation, please help us reach more people. Tell a friend, subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at 21_hats. And let me know if you have a question or a comment or a topic you'd like us to cover. My email address is lfeldman@21hats.com. See you next time.